Okay. Hi, everyone. Again, welcome to the webinar for the National Research Collaborative for Foster Alumni in Higher Ed. I want to let you know as we get started here that we will be recording the webinar today and making it available along with the PowerPoint on our NRC FAHE website. So you should be able to see our website here on your screens. And if you're joining us by phone, the website is www.nrc-fahe.org. And on that website, if you're not already part of our group, if you're not already receiving our emails, you can scroll down on that very front page, and there's a subscribe spot where you can join in and start getting our emails about upcoming events and other things that we're doing. So today, before we get started, I'm going to tell you just quickly about our next webinar. So our February webinar will be Wednesday, February 26th at 11 a.m. Pacific time, 2 Eastern, and we'll have presenters from the Jim Casey Youth Opportunities Initiative and Child Trends. They'll be doing a presentation called Utilizing Data from the Jim Casey Initiative to Improve Educational Outcomes. So they'll be talking about some highlights from recent research publications by the Jim Casey Initiative and discuss the practice and policy implications to support young people in achieving educational success. So if you're not sure how to register for that webinar, if you haven't gotten our emails, then you can just send me an email and I'll get you signed up for that. So today we have two wonderful speakers who will be sharing with us today. And just to give you an idea of how things will go, our presenters will present for about 35 to 40 minutes, and then we will open it up for Q&A at the end. So I encourage you, as our presenters are speaking today, if questions come up for you, please take a moment and type those in to the chat box and send those to me. Our presenters are really excited about hearing your feedback about their work, and so I ask, please take the time to send those questions in as they come up, and then at the end I will facilitate or read those out to our presenters so they can give some responses. So our two presenters today are Lisa Shelby and Lisa Jackson. So Lisa Shelby is an associate professor at Florida State University College of Social Work, a faculty affiliate of Florida Institute for Child Welfare, and also the co-editor-in-chief of the Child and Adolescent Social Work Journal. And her research focuses on youth aging out of foster care and the intergenerational transmission of child maltreatment. And our second presenter, Lisa Jackson, currently serves as the Associate Director for the Center of Academic Retention and Enhancement at Florida State University. And her work includes identifying and addressing emotional, social, academic, and health factors inhibiting the well-being of diverse student population, including those who've experienced foster care. So I will hand the presentation over to you all.
Okay, we should be set, and we've screen sharing. Excellent, great.
Hello everyone, my name is Lisa Jackson. Thank you so much, Amy, for the introduction. I am the Associate Director in the Center for Academic Retention and Enhancement here at FSU. I'm going to refer a lot to that department, but to make it easy for everyone, we're just going to go ahead and call it CARE. So today's conversation is really just going to involve us discussing a little bit more about the population.
I'm so sorry to interrupt. Let me just interrupt for a second. I don't see your screen sharing yet.
Wait, I forgot.
Oh, there, it's starting now. Okay, now we're good. Thank you. Sorry about that.
All right, so a little bit about today's conversation. I'm going to just do a few broad strokes about youth who are aging out of the system and some of the broad outcomes, and of course the programming that we do here at FSU for this population called the Unconquered Scholars Program. The unique challenges that these students report that they face while they're here, as well as the supports that we offer at the institution. And then Dr. Shelby is going to talk a lot about the research findings we've discovered over the last several years assessing our graduates, and then we welcome your questions so that we can really discuss those things at length and hopefully give you the information you need from today's webinar. So, well, what do we know? A study in 2013 by the Jim Casey Youth Opportunities Initiative gave us some grim data, really, on the broad outcomes of youth who are exiting the system compared to their non-foster care peers. I'll just call them peers going forward. Many of them are experiencing homelessness upon leaving the system. As you can see, a large percentage of women are pregnant by the age of 21, only half are employed, and 25% are going to have some justice system involvement within 2 years of exiting foster care. We've seen significant issues in education disparities as well. Only 50% of those aging out or graduating from high school. That's compared to over 80% of their peers who weren't in the system. And though nearly 84% of basically high school seniors that are in the foster care system are telling us they want to go to college, only 20% are actually ever stepping foot on a campus. And I think that number is very telling because it's consistent, that 84% with their non-foster care peers. You know, they're telling us in equal numbers, they really see higher education as a way of having a better life, but we're just not seeing them matriculate. And then of course, the number that we're all have seen, I'm sure for a long time now, you know, fewer than 3% of those alumni are completing a bachelor's degree, and that's compared to about 27–28% of the general population. So very, very dramatic differences in those who have been in the system and those who have never been touched by the system. And the cost to society is significant as well. Over a 10-year span, the Jim Casey Youth Opportunities Initiative studied a group of youth who exited and aged out of the system and found that we were spending over $300,000 over the course of their lifetimes to provide adequate support in terms of social services, interaction with the legal system, as well as lost tax revenues. And they estimated that cost to society at being about $226 billion. So we're seeing all throughout this narrative, the cost not only to the society, but also to the youth themselves for this academic underperformance. You know, over the lifetime, those who aren't completing high school education are earning about $300,000 less than those who do. And those who complete a bachelor's degree are earning over $1 million more over the course of their lifetime. So we know education pays. I don't think anyone's arguing against that, hopefully. But what we did, and I thought this was really fantastic news, was that a more recent study in 2014 showed that completing a 2- or 4-year degree is actually equalizing rates of current employment and substantially reducing gaps in annual earnings for foster youth alumni. So that to us really speaks to the fact that if we can just really find the gaps that these youth are experiencing, getting through high school, transitioning into college, being retained and graduated, that we really can make a significant difference in their overall life trajectory. And that sort of leads me a bit to the Unconquered Scholars Program here at FSU. Just a little bit of background, our program began in 2012. When a colleague actually here at the College of Social Work was walking across campus kind of wondering where these students are going when the residence halls close over the break. And the facts are that we weren't really sure and that we knew we needed to do more. So we're in our 7th year now. We have over 140 active students on the roster. It is a voluntary program, so no students on campus are required to join. And this program exists within CARE. CARE started back in 1968 to serve the needs of first-generation Pell eligible students. And obviously, there's a lot of overlap there. Almost all of the Unconquered Scholars are first-gen and Pell eligible because their families, however that translates, right? And they can't provide any support for their education. So They sat down back in 2012 and thought who would qualify if we developed a program. And this is what they determined. In order to be a member of Unconquered, you had to have experienced foster care, homelessness, been in relative care, either state supervised or otherwise, or be considered a ward of the state. Our mission is pretty simple. We're really trying to provide guidance, mentorship, advocacy, security, and a voice to these students to really ensure not only their personal academic success, but their long-term independence. And as you can see, I've bolded a couple of things here that I think are really critical. We very much honor these students' experiences. We believe that they are the experts in what it's like to be here at FSU, having gone through foster care or having been homeless. And we're not going to take a top-down approach to that. We really want to empower them to inform us about how to best support them. And while certainly we want to see every one of them graduate, ultimately our goal is to be sure that they are as prepared as they can be for launching from FSU without a safety net of a forever family that many of our students have here on campus. So I just wanted to kind of highlight those and bring that to everybody's attention. So how do we start this process of supporting these students? Well, the first thing is admission. Getting into the university is step one. I don't know if any of you have looked at an admissions application lately. It's pretty cumbersome and challenging, but we thought that the quickest, most efficient way for us as an institution to identify these students was to amend our application for first time in college freshmen to ask them the 4 qualifiers of Unconquered. Have you been in foster care? Were you homeless? Are you in relative care or ward of the state? So we can immediately know if an applicant qualifies. And then we're also operating and offering them an alternate admissions opportunity through CARE. CARE actually has reduced admission requirements into the university. Right now it takes close to a 4.3, I think, weighted GPA. Right around a 1360 SAT and a 31 ACT to get in through general admissions. Through CARE, to be considered for admittance, you can have a 3.0 weighted GPA, an SAT of 990, and a 19 ACT. So it greatly improves the ability for them to apply and be considered for admissions. We admit about 410 students every year through CARE. Again, that's first gen Pell eligible, but also Unconquered qualified students. And they're immediately admitted into our summer bridge program, which I'll talk a little bit more about later. Because we know that they're Unconquered qualified, we can monitor their application status and reach out to them when there are issues. Is a document missing? Has there been an omission or error? And help connect them with the people on campus that can work through those things so that their application can be completed and reviewed. And then once they've actually accepted their admittance into the institution, we engage them immediately with administrators as well as our students that are in the program to ease that transition into FSU because it can be a little daunting. The next thing we do is getting back to engaging student voice. Again, we want to know from the student's perspective what they need and what the challenges are. The Student Advisory Board works closely with myself, my office, our department, and different departments across campus. And they let us know what the other students are saying in terms of need. And we listen. It really informs all of our programming. So we meet regularly and assess what's going on for the students. And what they've told us over the years is that their barriers, retention, they go across domains: academics, funding, engagement, of course, housing, food, health, all the basics is probably not surprising for many people. What are some of the academic challenges? Well, college life is difficult. The adjustment to the academic rigor is significant and often comes as a shock for many of these students. Most of them, outperformed in their high school, sometimes with not a whole lot of effort. And when they get here, it's a bit of a surprise how difficult it can be. Just adjusting to independent life, managing their own time, going to class. Of course, there's no micromanagement in college, We have a first day of class attendance policy that students have to be there, but otherwise most classes aren't asking students to be there. So we really wanted to hear what those challenges were and to help them address those things. And the way we helped provide support to address these challenges were first off through the Summer Bridge program. Once they're admitted through CARE, they are put into a 7-week-long summer bridge that's designed to do exactly what it sounds like. We're trying to help ease that transition from high school into college. The first week is comprised of a lot of programming about academics, college life, where to find the food hall, where's the wellness center, how do I study now that I'm here, and then really kind of giving them a one-stop approach to our services in our department. We offer in a single building in the center of campus, 3 floors of support for these students. We have private classroom spaces, we have classrooms themselves, a computer lab, financial aid specialists, tutors, college life coaches. So we provide a lot of wraparound services to these students as soon as they're with us. We also require our freshmen to do 10 hours of mandatory study time in our building their first year to really sort of instill that that habit building of being diligent. And then of course we offer a lot of workshops to help them navigate the academics of college life. Now funding, it's really no surprise, it's really, really expensive to go to college. This actual infographic is a couple of years old. You'll see the $18,134 estimate for in-state costs to go to FSU for fall spring. That's actually a little bit low now. It's closer to $22,000 right now. That includes tuition, fees, books and supplies, housing, and meal plans. But what you're not seeing, in addition to just covering those expenses, are the challenges related to gap housing. Where are these students staying when the halls close for winter break, spring break, over the summer if they're not taking classes, food, medical expenses, transportation, a variety of different things that really present a lot of challenges for our students. So how are we handling some of those things? Well, obviously we're connecting them with financial aid. Each year FSU disperses over $280 million in financial aid funding to students. We also offer a lot of institutional funding to our first gen students that's specific to them, and we work diligently to connect these students with scholarships to offset some of the expenses. My personal belief is that we really need to try and limit student loans as much as possible. We're also very fortunate in the state of Florida to have a tuition and fee waiver for youth that qualify from our Department of Children and Families, which is good till their 28th birthday and actually covers even grad school. And some of those students also qualify for a monthly stipend, the post-secondary education services and support stipend, which helps offset some of their expenses as well. And then we also have a Florida homeless tuition and fee exemption for those students who are actively experiencing homelessness while they're at our institution. And of course, we help them navigate that process at FSU, and for those who are experiencing homelessness, we try and get them into stable housing. The challenges to overall well-being, I touched on these a little bit in terms of funding, but housing insecurity is a really significant issue. Many of these students think they have a safe, secure place sometimes to go between semesters or over breaks, and unfortunately it just doesn't always work out that way. Food insecurity is a persistent issue. And then there are a lot of identified physical and mental health issues. Many of our students do not have health insurance, despite the mandatory health compliance issue here at FSU. And those who do have Medicaid often do not have accessibility to a provider in the area. And we're seeing significant issue with mental health, specifically a lot of PTSD, depression, and anxiety. The way we're dealing with those is really to have very strong campus-based partnerships with different agencies. Our wellness center does the best they can to see our students, even those without insurance, and to make referrals appropriate to the community providers so that we can get them the health care they need. We work with campus housing on that gap housing issue, as well as local foster families if needed. And then we are able to access multiple food pantries on campus, offer counseling services to our counseling center. Another significant issue we're seeing, and this is, I think, potentially the most challenging, is the imposter perspective that many of these students arrive to campus with. They report feeling alone and different from the 41,000 other students on campus, and that leads to isolating behaviors and a resistance to asking for help. But what we do know is that if we can get them engaged, we're going to keep them, and then they're going to graduate. So we listen and we provide what we can. Our program is strengths-based, so we're really trying to help them see their successes and their strengths based on their life experience and help them reauthor through narrative therapy effectively those experiences. We also provide them with dedicated staff, someone who has expertise in working with this population, who's accessible and dependable. And we provide a scaffold approach to their programming. We want to support them as much as needed, but begin to remove those supports slowly once we can see that they have the skills developed to be independent and ultimately leave us as independent adults. And then we offer a lot of cohesion building activities because ultimately these students report that they want a campus family with each other. And as you'll see on the next slide, what we did was we actually gave them a study suite. This space is only for them on campus. This is effectively their campus family room. It is just for them so that they can be around other people who, quote, get it, that don't pity them, but understand where they're coming from, support them, and then basically tell them to go back to class. So we also listened when they told us they needed help getting to the grocery store. They needed suits and professional clothing for job interviews or internship opportunities. And we also learned that they weren't really thrilled with the idea of going to the larger food pantry on campus, but they would take it from their campus family, which is effectively our department. So we actually built out a smaller private food pantry just for them so that we could ensure that they were willing to eat. The other thing that they told us was that we have Parents Weekend here on campus. It's when tens of thousands of parents come visit their respective students. It's really a wonderful time of year for most FSU students, but our students really reported a significant academic, emotional, and social decline for weeks after Parents Weekend for obvious reasons. So we decided that the best way to mitigate that would be to take a campus family trip off of campus during Parents Weekend on campus. And now each year we take these students away to really the quintessential family vacation to Disney. And we've been very fortunate enough to do that through multiple donors and allies. And this is one of the most meaningful experiences the students tell us they have because they are with each other that entire time. And then finally, the data I think is really showing for a variety of reasons, I guess, what the effect is. I sort of alluded to some of the earlier numbers, but what we're seeing is that we've retained 90% of the program participants. They have an 85% graduation rate and a 2.9 cumulative GPA, which actually for years was actually outperforming the general student body at FSU. So this group of small subpopulation on campus that was statistically the most vulnerable and least likely to graduate was actually outperforming the other students. So we're hopeful, certainly, that this continues and that we're meeting their needs as best we can as an institution. Dr. Shelby?
So as exciting as all of the programming is about Unconquered Scholars and what's going on campus, ultimately the goal of the program is not just to get people successfully engaged and graduate, but to have healthy, productive lives after graduation. So what we wanted to do is we wanted to follow these students who had been engaged in the campus-based support program and had been in Unconquered Scholars and see what their life was in the year after graduation. So what we did is starting in 2016, so remember the program started in 2012, so 4 years later was the first year that we were graduating an entire class, although full disclosure, we did have one student who graduated amazingly in 3 years. 2016 spring semester was the first time we graduated a cohort, and so we started as, collecting data at that point. So it's an online survey that's we collect at baseline at graduation, 6 months after graduation, and 1 year after graduation. So it's survey questions that ask about various participation in Unconquered Scholar activities, as well as their plans upon graduation, and collect some basic information. We didn't have as great a retention as we wanted, so we were able to find funders, and incentives started in 2018, and we've seen more engagement. So the sample that I'm talking about today is only 29 graduating students who participated at baseline and 16 who followed at the 6-month follow-up. And within this spring semester, we will have another year of data and significantly more bigger numbers. But for now, I want to focus on this group. They were predominantly students of color, racial, and ethnic minorities, with the vast majority being female. What we saw is at graduation, students described being very engaged with Unconquered Scholars and felt the programs were quite helpful to them. And what we see is that while many students felt fairly prepared, only a few were saying that they felt completely prepared. Some of them felt that they were feeling completely competent that they'd be able to find a job that they are suited for after graduation, but only half. So while we are graduating, and by no means do I mean to minimize the graduation rate, we are incredibly ecstatic to see that number, but some of this data starts painting a different picture, that some of these students at graduation still may be facing an uncertainty, and we'll get into that more momentarily. So we asked students how did they feel that the Unconquered Scholars Program helped them, and very clearly they described sources of feeling support, having resources, the guidance, and feeling inspired and getting confidence through their family, as well as family that they created through Unconquered Scholars, as well as the staff. So here are 3 exemplar quotes that I selected that really cross these different domains and really emphasize the support and guidance and inspiration. The first student explains, it, meaning the Unconquered Scholars, offered my resources to make my college experience. It provided me confidence to overcome all obstacles. It offered me people I could lean on in times of need. I was provided with success coaches, mentors, and lifesaver. I couldn't have done it without Unconquered. Another student explained right at graduation that about the program. It kept me on track and confidence that I could do more than I originally believed. And a third student explained at graduation, the Unconquered Scholars Program supported me mentally and emotionally to know that I was not alone during my undergraduate experience. It helped me to know that I had someone behind me who wanted to see me succeed rather than me just being another number at Florida State. Students were very positive about being in the program and talked about some of their favorite things being a support system, having their family, that they created on campus. One of them explained it was a family right on campus. Multiple students described this community of peers and the fact that there was, quote, the feeling of unity and being around individuals who have been in similar situations like mine. The other thing that students really emphasize is that safe space, that living room feeling, and being able to sit on a couch and talk to someone who had been through something similar was repeatedly mentioned as something that was a favorite thing about Unconquered Scholars. They talked about advice that they would have given themselves, and this is something that we know is being circulated as in that living room, safe space, family feeling. They talked about the need to get involved, go to class, save money, and not to worry, and to believe in yourself. I think this last quote was quite poignant and an exemplar of the messages that students would be able to internalize through their working with staff and getting a chance to know other students. This student explained, I would tell myself to never give up, to never forget that I am capable of achieving dreams, to always work hard, have fun. Most importantly, despite any challenges that I may face, are just speed bumps in the road and you can get over them. So at graduation, the sense that we got was one of hope, one of gratitude, and a lot of excitement about the future. So at 6-month follow-up, what we see is that half the graduates were in graduate school, 75% were employed, with the vast majority of those being full-time, only 2 were working part-time, and 25% were looking for employment. About a third felt completely prepared to pay bills after college. Most people had to live with roommates or family out of financial necessity, although many of them also talked about it as a decision to live with people because of relationships. And almost everyone mentioned specific obstacles that they were experiencing. So at 6 months, and then actually we see this again at the year, but I have to focus on the 6 month, most of the graduates were talking about problems with money. They were experiencing problems with limited social support, and many of them specifically discussed struggles with adjusting to working. And some of this was about negotiating work relationships, dealing with bosses, the 9-to-5 grind. Some of this was about there's a lack of freedom and the structure, and then also just the mundane aspects of having a full-time job. When asked about those challenges, the obstacles, and what could be done, there were some really specific recommendations that the participants talked about. They specifically talked about money management skills. So there was a desire that they learn more about how to manage money, and not just budgeting, but how to invest, how to pick out insurance plans, how to start considering saving for retirement, also how to defer student loans out of financial necessity. So money management and financial literacy broadly were discussed as something that could be helpful. Having more workshops about life after graduation. Ideas about this were about owning a car, dealing with a roommate conflict, or dealing with, actually more than roommates, the issues of dealing with landlords, or dealing with supervisors, or conflict in the workplace. But basically things that are life skills that didn't necessarily need to be worked on in college, but after being launched into quote unquote the real world, that there was more of a need for those skills, and some of the graduates felt poorly prepared for those things. Career planning was huge. Of the students that were in graduate school, many of them talked about how they were in graduate school because the degree they got as an undergraduate did not fully prepare them for a job that they wanted. And some of them reflected that they got a degree because of their interest, but it was never going to pay the bills. And now they're having to get a second degree so that they can actually have a career that is sustainable, that pays a livable wage. So there was the desire that more could be done during college to help select those careers. Some of the students that weren't in graduate school were interested in looking at graduate programs, and said that it would have been helpful during their junior and senior year if there had been more of a movement towards applying to graduate school and figuring out how to prepare the strongest application, which then would make it more likely for them to get more fellowships and scholarships and making graduate school affordable. And finally, there was a desire to really facilitate connection with graduates. And this was saying that as they were graduating, it would be helpful to see what they were getting into, as well as building their social network. To go back to those postgraduate obstacles that they talked about is money, limited social support, and adjust to working. And what we see in these 5 areas that they talked about how we could help prepare them for life after college is that they really do center across these interconnected domains about making sure that they're more financially stable, that they have more social connections, and that their careers are stable, and that they have the tools to be successful. So what are some of the implications from this? Well, first, I just want to, before I'll reiterate this in a moment, I want to remind you that it is a very small sample size, so we really shouldn't rush to generalization. But we have enough information from the literature in connection with these findings is that it's safe to talk about the launch from college can be challenging for those who have been in foster care and had experienced homelessness. And we know that there is a lot that campus-based support programs are doing to promote retention and increase graduation. But we need to focus on more of academics. And this is actually something that Lisa was talking about previously in the way that Unconquered Scholar the program is designed is to increase student voice and long-term independence. So we're seeing that even though the program is targeting that, there's even more of a need to pay attention to this. There's also, in some of the feedback, there was talk about how leaving Unconquered Scholars and going to graduate school, there was a real lack of the support, which lends my thinking that it may be that campus-based support programs could be continued to graduate students and tailored to some of their unique needs. Likewise, we know that the typical college graduate is receiving substantial support from their families. And the students who graduated from Unconquered Scholars, like foster care alumni across the United States, often may not have that familial support that their peers do have. So making sure that there is a connection to support and resources in the first year after graduation. And I'm not just talking financial resources, but someone to go to talk to problem solve, to normalize the experience. As a professor who teaches undergraduates and as well as graduate students, I see many students, regardless of their experience in foster care, of struggling during this developmental period. And those who are foster care alumni have fewer safety nets to fall upon. So my thoughts broadly on the findings is that we really don't know much about how foster care alumni are faring after graduation. So one of my pushes is for these campus-based support programs is to follow these students, these graduates. While we can be ecstatic about our graduation rates, if our students are graduating and being forced to go stay in school so that they can defer loans and so that they can get another degree that's going to help them get a job that pays livable wage, I question if we fully have done our job very critically. And this is not my critique of Unconquered Scholars, but this is my critique of campus-based support programs and higher education broadly. We can't generalize these findings because of our sample size, but we can say that this is something that we should possibly look for. So there is enough evidence here that we need to understand more of the transition out of college and to see what our students need as they transition to life on their own. I want to conclude with some acknowledgments that we want to thank all of the Unconquered Scholars who have graciously given their time to complete the survey. CARE's director, Dr. Tadero Stark, we want to thank, as well as Pam McDill, who is at the College of Social Work and was really instrumental both in starting Unconquered Scholars, but also in the development of this evaluation. Tom Herndon is generously donated funding for the incentives. The Florida Department of Children and Families for their support of this ongoing work, as well as Florida State University. So I know that we're going to open up for questions right now, but we also want you to feel free to reach out to us if we can be of assistance as thinking more about how to develop campus-based support programs like Unconquered Scholars, or talking about some of the logistics of doing a follow-up study with graduates of programs. So here are our emails, and we really do welcome any and all questions to email or as well as conversations right now.
Okay, great. Thanks so much, Lisa and Lisa. So I'm going to give everyone a couple minutes if you for your questions. Go ahead and type your questions in. And for those of you on the phone who don't have the typing in option, if you want to email me your questions, my email address is amy.salazar, salazar@wsu.edu. But please go ahead and take a second and type in any questions that you have for our presenters.
And Amy, while we're waiting for, I assume, so we don't have any questions right now, is that correct?
No.
Okay, so maybe Lisa and I can just talk for a moment while we're waiting for questions, but please let us know when a question arises. But Lisa, can you talk a little bit about how you've taken some of this feedback already and you're incrementally changing? Like, I know that you've already done some stuff about financial literacy.
Yes, for sure. So kind of getting a little bit of feedback over the years, we also agreed that we need to do more from a financial literacy perspective and really getting it on students' radar, that ultimately not only did they need to leave FSU with that degree, but with a savings account, really, to fall back on and a plan for post-grad life. So we've actually implemented during their freshman year financial therapy. So you know, a lot of people sort of do something that falls under a financial literacy umbrella, but we all can add and subtract. That's not really the problem we're having with budgeting. We really address over a 5-week workshop series with these students the emotional reasons that they are maybe struggling with their budgeting and spending decisions, and helping them understand a little bit more about their relationship with money. So I'll be interested to see over the years and the next cohort surveys if we start to see fewer and fewer people describing that as a need for programming while they're here. But the feedback we get from the students after they've finished that workshop series is very positive, and we check back in with them over the years to see if they're using those skills, if not, why, you know, what else might work for them. But we certainly are sure to get on their radar much sooner.
Okay, so thank you. Our first question is, have you thought about trying to compare your post-survey outcomes with those of the general population to see how similar or different they are?
Excellent question. And I wish that our Vice President of Student Affairs and Vice President of Academic Affairs were here, because this is something that I think that it is an important context. And we know with the emerging adulthood period that increasingly young people are relying on family because they are struggling with finances and the adjustment to working. So I think that yes, it would be excellent to do so, and to find a comparison group that we could track would be excellent. we're doing this on a shoestring makes it sound like it's more substantial than it is. We're doing this on a dental floss budget. At this point, we don't have the ability to recruit a comparison group, but that would absolutely be something that would strengthen the findings. Great question.
Great, thank you. So the next question actually kind of builds on what you were saying about your dental floss budget. So how do you get funding for your program?
So
For the program or the research?
I think for the, I guess maybe just generally for the work that you're doing with youth.
So let me talk briefly about the research, but the funding, Lisa has been so resourceful and has lots of great things about that. But for the research, this is it's a passion project. This is volunteer time. I have a graduate student that merges data and runs queries occasionally for me. But this is all done on next to nothing. The incentives that we have were donated all by one individual, Tom Herndon, who is a champion of foster care alumni. And when we pitched the idea, Lisa Jackson pitched the idea, he gave us a budget. So that's the research. Now, as for the programming, Lisa can talk about the unique situation we have here.
Right. So Florida State, we're very fortunate to have a tremendous amount of institutional support for this population and the program overall. In fact, it's actually in our university's strategic plan to create a pipeline for youth aging out of the system and those experiencing homelessness to get all the way to FSU and get connected with Unconquered Scholars. So the university pays for salaries for the most part for staff. We also use some grant funding for graduate assistant salary. And then we work a lot, as Dr. Shelby was saying, to identify and nurture relationships with folks who are champions for former foster youth or homeless students to add on these additional support elements, furnishing a suite or taking these trips, making sure that they have as many of their needs met as possible, are often through grant funding or private donors.
Okay, thank you. The next question is, what are your thoughts on how to go about continuing to support these youth after graduation, through the campus support program or in other ways?
So I think that's one of the big questions that I have is I think that student engagement after graduation is a priority for many institutions through the forms of Alumni Network. And in some regards, some of the Alumni Network are about making sure that, if I may be so crass, is making sure that we keep track of our alumni so that they can donate and support the university in the future. And I do think that is part of what it's basically donor cultivation and growth. This is, we home grow our donor base as we graduate students. But I also see that the alumni networks have a strong potential for networking and building community and support. And I see that in some of our alumni networks that are in different areas. Women for FSU is a philanthropic group that is associated with the university that brings together women that care about Florida State University. And we have various chapters in different parts of the state and then in Atlanta. I think that there could be models of trying to network folks. Many of the students graduate and then they stay in Florida in some of the major cities. So I think that there could be some geographic concentration of connecting students. I also think that making sure that they connect with students who graduated ahead of them and building a network. So it doesn't necessarily need to be a campus-based support program. I also think that there is something to be said about providing some follow-up. And I know that some of our departments do that. So they send out newsletters to check in, they check in or have homecoming events. So I think that there are potential ways to stay connected, but what is necessary in all of them is some infrastructure and funding. And none of this can be done for free, although I do want to be very clear that I see in this campus support program, as well as every other one that I've ever interacted with, that staff and champions go above and beyond. And so there are a lot of resources that are just that we can tap into, but much more are needed. Do you have, I mean, I talked, do you have thoughts about what that would look like?
Yeah, and that's a great question. I was just sort of pondering some of that. Our department serves undergraduate students, which sort of restricts our mission as a campus-based support program. Now, I informally serve grad students that have graduated out of Unconquered and are still on campus, and even beyond. Many of the alumni still reach out to me on a consistent basis and just check in and talk, but it's not formalized. And then if we're talking about fiscal support, I don't really know how that works. If a grad student somewhere else, or even not even a student, maybe just someone who's graduated from the program in the university, is needing assistance, but they're not technically a student anymore at FSU. There are limits and regulations around funding people who are no longer students on campus. So I think that gets into, just a lot of areas of discussion to see what's even possible.
Thanks. So I have a question. I was wondering if you would be willing to say a little bit more about how you developed the financial therapy approach that you use.
So we actually partnered with a colleague and professor here at the College of Social Work who developed that particular intervention. He was very gracious enough to provide us with his materials, and then we just took time to sort of edit them and tailor them to our student population in a way that we thought would be well received and understood. And we just then implemented it with our students several years ago, actually now. So it was just through collaboration, and I really can't speak enough on how important it is to have a collaborative process on and off campus, and to also work with off-campus partners. That was Dr. Thomas Smith here in the College of Social Work. So really, really stellar intervention. We were very fortunate to be able to use it.
Okay, cool, thanks. So I just have another question just pop up. So do a percentage of your Unconquered scholars come from community colleges, or are most first-time college students? Does that change the services offered to them?
The vast majority come in as first-time in college students through that summer bridge program, that alternate admissions mechanism offered through CARE. We do have some students who transfer into Unconquered from a 2-year institution with an associate's degree. And the only difference that they might see is access to some of the institutional funding provided to summer bridge participants only. But we always do our best to try and find alternative grant funding opportunities for those transfer students to mitigate whatever financial strains we can.
Okay, thank you. Well, that's all the questions I've received. So I think we will wrap up here. Was there anything else you wanted to add in?
No, thank you so much for this opportunity to talk about the program and our evaluation. We are going to be writing this as a technical report and a publication after we finish this next round of data collection. So this spring, we'll have enough of a sample that we are feeling that we can get this published. But in the meantime, if there's anything that we can do to be of assistance with anyone who's wanting to do some similar work, please reach out to the two of us. We would love to support other people and their ventures.
Okay, awesome. Well, thank you so much, Lisa and Lisa, for presenting today. And just a reminder, or thank you all for coming to listen. And just a reminder that we'll be posting both the recording and the PowerPoint on our website soon. Thanks, everyone.
Thank
Thanks.
you.
Bye.